3D clothing in textile research, how and why. This presentation will show a concept of how one can use a 3D software in textile research. As a study object, I used the Pskov dress find from Viking Age Russia. I'm sure many of you recognize it. The main part of the find is interpreted as an upper part of a dress. It is made of silk. I have not studied the Pskov find myself, therefore most of the facts come from publications. But I have seen the find at the Pskov Archaeological Center in Russia. In 15 minutes, we will have a 3D representation of the Pskov find. This is not a reconstruction. It is only a hint of what can be made with this software, since the purpose of this presentation is to show the software and not the find. So, with that said, let's start. During this presentation, I will show 3 aspects of working with digital dress. Firstly, trying out a pattern idea, a 3D toile if you will. Secondly, 3D visualization of archaeological fragments. And thirdly, reconstructing a garment, or several possible garment interpretations, if you will. So, this is the Clo 3D software. It has a sister program called Marvelous Designer. These programs are used in the fashion industry and in film and gaming industry to create 2D patterns and 3D digital clothing. To the right, you see the 2D view and your 2D pattern pieces. And to the left, you see the 3D view with your mannequin or avatar. You can also show only the 2D or the 3D view if you want. You'll see that in a second. To the right and left, you also have a lot of tools to change anything you can think of. Fabrics and the properties like friction, density, and you name it. Seams and anything. Here I have made a basic trial of the preserved find and how it is interpreted in the publications. You can see that it is very wide, both in the front and in the back. Also, all of that width is not accounted for in the preserved fragments. You can see a lot of the width here in the back. So I actually took a bit away in making the change in the 2D view, and then I simulate it in the 3D view. And after doing that, it looks quite neat, I think. Now, this is what we got as far as the preserved parts go, but I will add a skirt to continue exploring the possibilities. Back to the 2D view, I add the skirt panel and the seams, and then arranging the pattern pieces and simulate it. Then of course we want a back panel as well, and I made it blue since there is blue linen in the find, however almost completely disintegrated. The amount makes it likely that a large part of the garment was made of linen. The upper silk part might have been lined with linen as well. I will show the preserved parts, but first I decided to try one thing. I'm not sure you can see it here, but I turned the pattern around, putting the front at the back and the back at the front, so to speak. This is originally not my idea. There is another researcher who tried this, and I will get back to that in a bit. Here I am arranging the loops. I believe the tall part was interpreted as the front piece since it has preserved short loops. In Viking dresses, normally the short loops go at the front and the long at the back. Here, in this find, no back loops are preserved, only stitching holes. So to make it easy for me, I put short loops all around. And here, arranging the pattern pieces, you might notice that I again try a wide front here. And simulating this. But of course I want to try a narrow front as well. And as you can see in a bit, I have to pin the loops directly onto the avatar since there are nothing to hold the dress up at the moment. It would otherwise fall to the ground when simulating. And I think it looks very nice with a narrow front actually. Okay, let's add some preserved fragments. I will add them as one unit. This is prepared in another photo software, and it works very well for this project, I believe. I add the file and then I match it to my pattern parts, and I already made sure the size will be correct, but there are several ways to go about this, depending on what you want to analyze and what softwares you want to work with, for example. And in a bit, I will fine-tune the edges, since I know that these edges are finished edges on the preserved piece. They are a bit sad looking and uneven, but they do not miss fabric, and I want my pattern piece to follow the original. And here I'm trying to match it together with the other pattern piece. The original doesn't have a 90-degree angle between the pieces, and I want to follow the original shape here. And now almost finished for simulation. I just need to add some more seams here. And what you can do now when you have the preserved fragments on your 3D model is to see and analyze where the original fragments actually ends up on a body. There are better examples of this process than on this garment, but I assure you that it can be really handy to follow imprints or metal residues or wear and whatnot. So, I have an idea about this dress, an idea that isn't mine, but a colleague of mine's. It consists not only of turning this dress, putting the chest piece at the back, but also to in some way fold it. The video now shows how I prepare for the folds. The preserved piece does not, as far as I know, tell of any signs of folding or stitching, but let's try it anyway. Solving how it is folded is based on the analyse that says that the dress was lined with linen, and of more modern images of traditional sarafan backs with a kind of rounded folds. The piece at the top there is the linen lining, which will hold the folds in place eventually. And I'm placing the seam lines here. And when doing layered clothing, there is a bit more arranging to do before simulating, and there are several ways to force the pieces into the correct layers, and now I do it like this. By hand, so to speak. And simulating. And it looks quite interesting. It could be a bit big. And here's another benefit from doing fitting digitally. It is possible to explore the avatar size instead of changing the garment size. And now I think it's time to add the silk pattern, as it might have looked at the time it was worn. So I took the preserved fragments away and changed back to the blue skirt. And I also want to tighten the folds a bit, so I just changed the size of the lining piece. Yeah, looks a bit better. I do the silk pattern in a photo software and in one block like this. I would do the separate pattern pieces one by one if I did a real reconstruction though. And now I'm adding the silk print in Clo. And for a more finished look, I added an underdress as well. The pattern is based on the original find as it is interpreted in the publications. And, well, it doesn't look too good at the moment. I haven't set the correct fabric yet, so it's a bit stiff and uneven. But then, when you're happy with your work and you can see now it's a bit different, then you can render it as images like this. To the left, you still see the 3D view, but to the right, now we have the render view instead. And the finished images look like this. And I also rendered a video. And thank you all for listening. And I hope you now have an idea how a 3D software can be used in our research field. And the colleague I've been speaking about with the original idea about turning the back to the front, that would be Annika Larsson, and I think she's in the audience right now. Thank you very much.